Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of AGC's Fight to Foster. I'm really excited because today we have Miss Kentucky 2025, Ariana Rodriguez. Welcome, Ariana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. I want to share with people a little bit about why you're on here. Ariana is very unique because she has experience in the foster care system from her own life, and she has been such a valuable person to empower other women and other young men as well who have grown up in the foster care system. So, Ariana, share for people who don't know a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I grew up in kinship and foster care. I spent 8 years in kinship care, about 20 different placements before I was placed in the Kentucky foster care system. I stayed in foster care for about 2 years and then eventually became homeless at 16 after exiting the foster care system at 14 and lived 2 years out of my car until I went to college. And my senior year of high school, I started pursuing the Miss America opportunity. I found out my senior year that I had exited foster care 26 days too early to receive any financial aid. And so I initially started competing within the Miss America organization for the scholarships. And the rest is history.
That just hearing your story reminds me of a social work term, which people might not know that, but you're in school for social work. It's the term resilience, which is the ability to bounce back after you continually go through hardships, which it sounds like you've been through quite a bit. What is it that keeps you moving forward and keeps you trying and seeking out opportunities like Miss America?
Yeah, well, I have two younger siblings, Carter and Zoe, and I knew that they would need a role model and a spokesperson to look up to. So that's what kept me going, even on the most difficult days where I didn't really want to get up and do the work, days where I was tired. I just kept thinking about them and about how if I didn't change the narrative for them, then I wasn't sure that anybody else would step up and do that. And so that's what kept me going.
That's really cool. As you do that, I am sure you don't do all of this alone because just the details of Miss Kentucky and the work you have to do. Who has been the biggest support person for you outside of your siblings, of course?
Probably my local director, Kim Lyle. She was my director when I was Miss Bardstown, which is a preliminary competition to Miss Kentucky. Um, I'm actually going to dinner or going to lunch with her after this to celebrate her birthday. But she's just been so impactful in my life. She helped fundraise to get me through the first 3 years of competing. After I competed in my first pageant, I had put all of my college savings into competing. And after I competed in my first pageant, I lost. And I was just crying backstage. And she came up to me and she said, "If you want to go to Miss Kentucky, we'll get you there." And she put a post out on Facebook saying, if anybody wants to help this girl, she really wants to go to Miss Kentucky. And people donated from across the state and across the country to help fund my journey, paid the entry fees. My other contestants that I was competing against helped give me dresses and earrings and teach me how to do better in interview and walk better on stage. And just so many people within the pageant community have came together to support me.
That's really incredible. I appreciate you sharing that because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about the pageant world, mostly that come from miscongeniality.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you sharing like what a supportive community it's been for you and how it's really brought you further in life.
Yeah.
Now, this is my own curiosity. Like, what happens after this year? Are you able to like continue in that world?
No, so you can only be Miss Kentucky once. You can only go to Miss America once. And so my journey will be over after I give away my title. But it has been incredible so far, and I'm sure the rest of the year will be just as incredible as it has been.
That's really unique opportunity. I'm glad you got to do that. And like moving forward, do you see yourself interacting with that world and pouring into someone else or
Yeah, I will probably go back to the preliminary competition that got me into pageants, the Miss My Old Kentucky Home organization, and help out as a local director eventually. But I think after I do my year of service, I'll probably want to take a couple years off and just focus on school, getting my master's.
that's very smart. What's your master's going to be in?
I'm wanting to do public policy. I'm still in my undergrad, so I probably shouldn't be talking about masters yet, but eventually I would like to get it.
So, like, in 5 years, what do you see yourself doing after you get that master's?
So I want to run an independent living facility for youth who age out of the foster care system or teenagers who are currently going through kind of that residential space, just giving them life skills and other resources so that they can be successful when they transition out of foster care.
I think there's a lot of people who don't realize the need that's there. Like you were talking about your own journey with being homeless, with just missing the mark for funding. What would you say to someone who doesn't know anything about that world, about what it's like aging out of the foster care system?
Yeah. Honestly, it would take hours for me to explain everything. Number one thing that I would say is just educate yourself, do your research. We thankfully live in a world where we have all of the information in the world at the touch of our fingertips. So do your research, listen to other people's stories. From my personal experience, which is not everyone's experience, a lot of times youth in foster care are kind of put in this box and told, your experience is this, so it must be everyone's experience. I have mine, but it's not the same as everyone else's. There's a lot of struggles that youth in foster care face just in general, but those struggles become amplified a lot when you're older. People, a lot of times, who want to give back, they think about little kids in foster care. We've even seen this with my nonprofit, The Lucky Ones, when we're looking for toys for our Christmas toy drive. People bring in Barbies and cars because they have this idea of, helping a small child in foster care because that's what makes us happy. We think about like puppies the same way that we think about like little kids, and we're just so eager to help those. But really older kids, they need a lot more. They don't want Barbies or, dolls. They want the nicest pair of Nike shoes because they're teenagers, and so they have a lot of different struggles. And a lot of times people who are willing to foster and adopt, they do want younger kids because they want to be around for their whole life. They want to see them growing up from a young age, and you don't get that full circle experience, I guess, as much if you take in a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
But they need it just as much, sometimes more, because people aren't as willing to foster or adopt older kids as they are young kids. And so there's so many struggles that youth in foster care face, but I would say those are the most prominent ones, along with a lot of teenagers who have spent a long time in the foster care system. Once you've been in a certain amount of homes, even if it has nothing to do with the way that the child acted or their personality or how they really adhere to the new homes, it has nothing to do with that a lot of times. But once you've reached a certain amount of homes, you're placed on an at-risk list. And so it's harder to place you. And a lot of teenagers who have been in foster care obviously would go through more homes than a child. And so there's just so many different challenges that teenagers face that a lot of the younger kids don't face as much.
You did that very succinctly. You're right. That could be a whole 2-day. Yeah, you could go on forever. I want to talk about it a little bit from part of my job here, day to day at AGC, is to read every referral that comes to our agency. And a lot of them are teenagers. And what's fascinating is people don't understand, like you said, the puppies aspect. Like, there's real trauma, and I'm reading, like, yes, they did this. I understand it sounds really bad, but do you know the story behind it? And when you start to dig, you're like, no wonder they did that. And it is a hard battle. Part of AGC's history is a home for teen moms. If you look us up, we have some nasty reviews. Why? Because teenage girls who were here and they were angry at that time wrote their anger online because they had access. But it wasn't because we were doing something bad. It was the trauma they were going through, and they had never had anyone care for them before. And while that might look bad, the reality is for them, they felt safe enough to be loud with us. They felt safe enough to get angry for the first time in their lives. And that's the reality of when you're dealing with a teenager, especially, is like, that might sound bad, but in reality, that's one of the biggest compliments, is they feel safe enough to voice an opinion and to speak. And it's just a completely alternate world that's so rewarding. You talk about how people want like the Barbie experience and all that, but I just look at some of our foster families that have teenagers, and they'll come back and they'll be like, we got to get their driver's license with them, or we took them for their first job. And when you spin that narrative a little bit, you get to do some of the coolest stuff in someone's life. Like, you get to be there for their first job, when they graduate high school. You get to dream with them. Mm-hmm. If you're willing, you can go to all the colleges. You can go around the country, go to colleges, and say, where do you want to go to college? And if someone has, which doesn't always seem like a privilege, but that privilege of aging out and getting that funding, and they have an adult there to support them on that journey, they can go really far with that funding. Yeah. I think that's really awesome. You're using your platform to raise awareness to that funding being available. Mm. Not everyone realizes that they can age out of foster care and get that money.
And a lot of people don't realize that if you don't age out of foster care, there's really no support. Like, I'd been in the system for 10, 11, 12 years, and I got no support, even though I'd spent my entire life in the courtroom, living with 20 different placements, 20 different times, just moving over and over again, like 12 different school districts by the time I was 14 years old. Yeah. And, I understand that I didn't age out, but also there are so many youth who have spent so much of their life in foster care, enough to truly impact the way that, they develop and the way that they're not as equipped sometimes as other youth. And so they need the extra support. And it's not given to them a lot of times because they don't age out. They don't meet the requirements, even though they desperately need the support just as much as anybody else.
Agreed. And this is a random question you may not have an answer to, but like, when you think of this independent living facility, what is the biggest thing that you would want in it?
Yeah, so my idea in my head is to partner with the engineering department at the University of Kentucky. They've done a couple programs where they build tiny houses and send them overseas. So I imagine having maybe 10. So 10 people who are exiting foster care who are kind of in that same situation as me, where maybe you exited at 14, but you become homeless and don't really have that support because you're not a ward of the state anymore. I want about 10 of those kids to be able to live in their own tiny homes on a residential facility and go to like a community center in the middle of the residential facility and be able to learn those life skills that you don't learn in foster care. So many times children in foster care are so focused on surviving that they don't even get to think about what college they're going to go to, or how to dress for an interview, what to put on a resume, how to do taxes, how to, pay your phone bill. Some kids don't even know those soft skills, like how to communicate with others. And so I imagine it being a place where we have professionals come in and teach those things to children so that they exit foster care, they exit the residential facility knowing the life that they're about to step into and how to navigate all of those challenges. Because when I exited foster care, I didn't know how to do my taxes until I started competing in Miss America. I didn't know what to wear to an interview like this. I didn't know what to put on a resume, and I would not have been successful if I didn't have people step in and mentor me through those things. And so I envision the independent living facility being a place where you can come in and just others from the community can work to fill in the gaps that those youth didn't get because they were in foster care.
You have a really good setup. My social work brain is kicking into gear on a whole conversation we're not going to go down, but you have a great mind for that, and I can tell you could really do that someday. If when you think of your siblings and the support they've given you and stuff, do you see them helping you with it someday?
Yeah, so I've actually had this planned out since I was 14 years old, and I want to call it Elizabeth Lee because my younger brother's middle name is Lee and my younger sister's middle name is Elizabeth. So they're a big part of it already, and it hasn't been built.
I love that. For those who don't know her sisters, what they're here today.
Keep looking over at her.
Yeah, we'll keep her off the camera. But, as we're talking to, what is something you wish, because we have a lot of foster families, what is something you wish that they knew or you would want to tell them to understand if they're taking in a teenager or even a young adult?
A lot of times I hear foster parents say, you know, it's really hard. Or I hear potential foster parents saying, I would get into it, but I would get attached. It would be really difficult. What I say to that is, if that's difficult for you, someone who has probably not experienced the same amount of trauma as these kids in foster care, someone who is years older than these children, if that's difficult for you to even wrap your head around raising them, imagine how difficult it is for the kid. And imagine their life with and without a mentor, with and without that social support, how different that could look. Especially since this is a Christian organization, I always tell people, God says in the Bible, it is your responsibility to take care of widows and orphans in need. It's not if it's convenient for you do it. It's you have to do it. If you truly are a servant of God, you should do that. And that's just what I tell any foster parent, whether they're looking into the foster care system or already working within it. When things get difficult, which they will. I mean, we're talking about teenagers. I have my little sister over there, and she drives me crazy multiple times a day. But I love her, and I do it anyway because I know the difference that I'm making in her life, and I hope that foster parents do try to see that in the same light, because you truly are, you have the potential to change someone's life. You have the potential to change the trajectory of their entire future. Really listen to youth in foster care, because my experience is not going to be the same as anyone else's. So you have to meet them where they're at, and you have to ask them, what do you want? What do you not want? What are your hopes and your dreams and your fears, to really get to understand them and what they need and how you can best support them.
I love that. And I love that you use the word mentor, not parent.
Yeah.
Because I think that's super important to recognize is there are still parents.
Yeah.
There are parents that children were born into, and that will always be a person connected to you.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. Sometimes teenagers do just want that, a mentor, and that's okay. And it's saying let me look at it from this lens, mentorship rather than parent. Because at that point you are teaching independence. I appreciate you saying that about independent living. Once you're 18, you're an adult, and you still want to say, no matter what's happened to you, you can become Miss Kentucky. Yeah. You can get your master's and whatever you want. Like, there is a world of opportunity. I feel like we live in a world that does play on the victim part a little bit. My own family story has some threads similar to yours, and I think of how many people did tell me as well, like, you're a victim. It's okay if you sit this one out, or it's okay if you sit on the sidelines. But I look at you and see the people that have been in your life, and I have the same story of so many people that have been in my life and my family's life, and those people were the ones that encouraged me and said, you can get your master's. You can get your bachelor's, you can be Miss Kentucky, you can do whatever you want to do, and we're not going to keep you in this perpetual state of childhood or victim. We are going to make you the best at whatever you're called to be.
Yeah, because a lot of times, youth who have experienced the foster care system, even at 10 years old, I was already adulting. I had already pretty much raised 2 children. Raised myself, was still going to school, was thinking about college. I was used to cleaning up the entire house, making sure that everyone was okay and everything was perfect. I was already living as if I were an adult. And so to go from that to being placed in foster care and told, you're a child, you need to listen. My foster mom, would yell at us and tell us we had to call her mom. And we're like, we have a mom, like, you're not our mom. Why would we call you that? Yeah. And you're right. We didn't need a parent. We needed a mentor. We needed someone to meet us where we're at and to say, I understand you have a mom. I'm just here to try to help fill in the gaps because she can't. And I really wish that more foster parents took that approach, because as good of an idea it is to have in your head, like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and be a parent for someone who needs one. A lot of times you don't know what they need, because a lot of foster parents don't ask, Yeah. And it's as simple as that, asking the child, would you rather me just be here as a mentor?
Yeah.
Do you want more of a parental figure? I mean, it would be kind of an uncomfortable
Yeah.
situation because if you think about going into foster care, you're placed at the doorstep of a stranger.
Yeah.
You don't know each other. So those first couple of weeks are really difficult and just like weird. And it just like
Yeah.
everything feels weird for a while. But it would have made me feel a lot more comfortable and safe if someone would have just approached me and said, like, what do you want from this? What
Yeah.
can I give you that you need right now? Instead of just kind of assuming that I needed a parental figure to tell me what to do and to,
Yeah.
teach me how to be a kid. It was almost like I was being punished because I wasn't childlike enough, even though I'd been punished in kinship care a lot for being not adult-like enough because I was the oldest and I was a girl, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure for any young woman who is the oldest in her family to kind of help support and help raise the children.
Yeah.
But when you're in foster care, it's a complete different dynamic, and so it was weird going from being so young and placed in these adult-like situations and then being put in the court system and told, like, you can't testify though because you're a child, even though I'd already act like an adult for years at that point. So it was really weird, but every child is different, like I said, and you could understand so much more if you just ask, even if it is a little uncomfortable. It could just change the narrative completely.
I appreciate you saying that, just ask.
Mhm.
And I was put into a lot of adult roles as a child, and I just appreciate that of like someone asking you act like a child now, and you're like, but what is a child?
Yeah.
What do they do? And so it's like then I would add on and say for like a foster parent to teach what it means to be a child, like invite into hobbies like basketball or football or dance or cheer and say, let's do this together. Don't assume that someone knows how to play or be imaginative or be a child. Like you said, it's survival versus thriving. And when you're dealing with foster care, you're dealing with a lot of survival and just praying that you will make it to the next day.
Yeah.
And then you're in this atmosphere where you're safe and have a moment to breathe. And you're like, but wait, what do I do here? I appreciate you talking about that. As you're talking about all these things, can you tell people a little bit about the Lucky Ones and what you do with that?
The Lucky Ones is a nonprofit I designed to educate the public about the issues of the foster care system and really amplify the voices of youth who have experience in it themselves. We have so many different initiatives, so many that I have to memorize a new list like every single week. I have a really great board of about 13 board members, and then we have about 40 volunteers who just help out with different initiatives. But I would say our two most prominent ones are our suitcase project, which is becoming less prominent because we just did an initiative with DCBS, every DCBS office in the state of Kentucky, the Department of Education and Team Kentucky, and the Department of Agriculture for the state of Kentucky. And we worked with all of those organizations to go into schools and to have every school in the state of Kentucky fundraise and collect suitcases filled with essential items for youth in foster care. And we've collected so many that we're being told, like, hey, we can't take these because we have too many. Like, we don't have the storage. We don't have kids to give these to. So it's a really great problem to have because a year ago, we couldn't find any residential facility or any foster care agency who didn't need them. And so to be able to call, like, 10 different places and be like, no, we had enough donations to where we don't need any more. That's been really incredible. But that was one of our most prominent initiatives. And then the Lucky Ones podcast, the Lucky Ones podcast, which is a platform that I designed to let foster youth tell their own stories. So many times when you're in foster care, you're told what to think or how to feel or what to say. And really, the Lucky Ones podcast, I mean, I let people pick which questions they want to be asked. I let them pick which parts of the story that they want to tell and how they want to tell it. It's really their platform to say anything, to get angry, to get upset, to feel the happiest you've ever felt. We do it all on that podcast. It just depends on what each individual wants. And so that's been a really good learning experience for me because I've gotten to learn again that no two people in foster care are the same. We all have widely different experiences and futures and pasts, and it's just so encouraging to see everyone else's stories and what they've been through and how their future is so different than mine. And success looks different to everyone. So of course it's going to be different than mine. I'm the only Miss Kentucky that I've had on the podcast, but hopefully there will be more in the future. But I've gotten to interview social workers, I've gotten to interview legislators, daycare workers, I mean teachers. There's one woman named Olivia. She's a police social worker, but she works with canines as a therapy for children in foster care. So I've just been able to interview so many different people who just do this work in so many different ways that you really wouldn't expect, and who came from such different backgrounds. It's just really incredible. That's probably my favorite initiative that we have.
I love that, and that's how I found out about you. Actually, is that's my passion and my heart with in the world of foster care and in general is empowering people to share their own story. I've worked with foster care trafficking victims, keep going around in circles about the topics, and there's nothing more powerful than being given a microphone and saying, I can share my story because it's mine and I own it, and I want you to hear me and my voice matters. And I feel like that's what you're doing is you're sending the message to a foster child who has been alone, who's been placed in all these different locations, that they matter, that their voice means something, that when they walk in a room, they will be heard. And that's one of the most powerful things that you can do.
Definitely.
I don't want to keep you here all day, although I could. I wanted to ask you, we're doing this campaign where we're trying to get more foster families, and we're launching a new initiative to work with birth parents more. To anyone who wants to support foster kids or is considering like being a foster parent or even supporting birth parents, what would you say to them?
I think that there's a way that everyone can get involved. A lot of people will be called to foster, and I think that they should 100% start that process as early as possible. There's almost 9,000 children in foster care just in the state of Kentucky, I believe. We're almost up to 500,000 in the whole country, and so there's definitely a need for it. And from my personal experience, I know that I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I didn't have people step in and take on those kinship care roles and foster care roles. So definitely look into it. It's not for everyone. And you'll know if you go through the process that maybe it's not for you. But for a lot of people, it will be for them. And they'll realize that, this is the thing that they've been looking forward to their life. It will be a calling that maybe you didn't expect, but that truly just changes your life and the way that you look at everything. I've met so many foster parents who say like, oh no, I would never do that. And then they try it and they just fall in love with it. They fall in love with being able to support the kids in an untraditional way. But even if you aren't called to be a foster parent, think about the other ways that you could help. Can you donate suitcases and other supplies to foster parents? Can you collect donations to maybe give to a foster care agency to help them support youth who are entering the foster care system? When I went into foster care, I was given a trash bag. So those suitcases really just changed the narrative because it gives dignity to someone who's going into foster care, which typically you don't get. You could also be a respite care worker and just help out those foster parents on weekends or help biological parents. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can help. Just do your research and find out what path would be best for you and your family.
I think that's all great and exactly what I would say too. I want to go back to what you talked about with us being a Christian agency. Is I was saying this in an interview the other day. It is a biblical mandate as well. It's James 1:27, and reiterate what you were saying. Not everyone's called to be a foster parent. I understand that completely, but you gave such great alternatives to being a foster parent and being involved as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, everyone can do something. And you don't have to have money. I mean, maybe it's just volunteering your time. Maybe it's going and, reading a book to kids who are in foster care. Maybe it's planning a Halloween party or a Christmas party. It can look so different for everyone. Maybe it's like making Christmas cards to just give to kids in foster care so that they have something to take back home with them, so that they know that they're loved and supported by their community, by people who don't even know them. I mean, everyone can do something.
I love that. Also, we're looking for volunteers for our Christmas party, as you said that. So, putting that plug in there. And you're right. It's like you need people everywhere. And it's a need that I would love someday to end, to be honest. I don't know that it will, as you pointed out, the 500,000 mark. But we can hope and dream, and we can do our part to help fight to foster.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. This has been so fun.
It's been really fun.